The Great Demon Lord and the Children of Olympus by Sea of Mountains. Chapter 13, A Strange Man That Even the Gods Don't Know About. Another reason why I have been basically dead for the past few months is because of Genshin 3, but let's see how many chapters I can spit out before I crawl back to my mouse hole again. Look at me spouting bullshit and not even having the chapter finished at the time of writing this. This chapter will contain a lot of dialogue that is only vaguely described by the wiki, so I am going to have to wing it based on what I remember of their personalities and how the camp works. My memory is very bad for your reference. Please bear with me. Mooncake. Welcome to Camp Jupiter, Percy. Though, not quite yet, Reyna said as she held out a hand towards the towering walls that surrounded the campus, leaving Percy speechless. Let's head in for now. Reyna seemed somewhat hesitant but brushed it off as if nothing had happened. As soon as they entered the gates, June, who Percy had been carrying for the past minutes, suddenly jumped off with surprising grace as a warm golden glow enveloped her. The old lady who had been standing there a moment ago was now replaced with a figure in her prime, her locks of black hair flowing down her shoulders as she lowered her gaze towards the demigods. Without any noise or extra movements, the half-bloods immediately bowed their heads down in respect as the raven-haired woman simply stood in front of them. What are you doing? Reyna shot a glare towards Percy. Do you not know to show your respects in front of the gods when they appear? Percy could only fumble around with his words as he took in the new information. Gods? Heck, if snake-headed woman existed, why not gods as well? You are currently standing in front of Juno, the goddess. Reyna began but was cut off by the goddess standing before them. Child, calm down. It is fine, I am only here to introduce to you the son of Neptune. Juno continued on in a smaller voice as if she was organizing her thoughts, unheard by the shocked demigods. There may have been some disruption, but this will still work. Yet still overheard by another individual who had tagged along. A son of Neptune, if I may? Reyna asked as she overcame her shock. Juno only smiled as she replied. Yes, and he will be very important in the future. The smile on the goddess' face stayed as the goddess gave her parting words. It seems like my time is now up. I will leave the rest. Juno paused midway as her gaze focused on something further away by the gates of the wall. A moment of silence ensued as the demigods followed to where Juno's gaze laid. Then suddenly, to everyone's surprise, except for Juno of course, a figure emerged from the shadows behind the walls and started to speak. Fufu, it seems that I have been discovered. The voice of the man that emerged from the behind the walls began as if everything had been expected by him. Well, it was only a matter of time before a blessed deity, no? What an interesting choice of words. The smile on Juno's face persisted as the group of demigods came face to face with the owner of the voice. You seem to be similar to the sons of Pluto, but I have no recollection of any surviving sons of his. So what are you? The demigods could only stare at the new individual that even Juno did not recognize. His hair was just as dark as the shadow he emerged from, only separated by a streak of red and yellow. He wore a simple, loose white collared shirt tucked into a pair of black slacks. A chain that seemed to just be for decoration swung at his hips as the man bowed down and introduced himself. I am but a mere servant, they introduced themselves with a smirk. I was only sent here to look for someone, but I have just been sent orders to simply observe and protect. I have no intentions to disturb what you have planned, goddess. Similar questions now ran through the heads of all of the half-bloods as this man continued to converse with Juno all too casually for their liking. Juno seemed amused at his reply. Very well, I will now take my leave. Your master seems to be quite the generous one to send someone like you. Whoever you're protecting must be quite important. Another set of eyes shouldn't do any harm, no. With a flash of brilliant white light, the goddess disappeared, leaving behind the flabbergasted demigods with the unknown man. The short silence was cut by the new addition to the group. How beautiful, yet it still can't compare to Lord Ah. The man suddenly turned towards the demigods. He was handsome but in a different manner from what the demigods were used to. Please carry on. My existence can be forgotten. He had a permanent smile that never grew nor shrank on his slim face, much more feminine compared to the chiseled visages that the gods usually preferred to use as their mortal form. And while he had a rather skinny appearance, incomparable to the gods, The way he carried himself and moved with such precision proved by no means was this man weak. Who are you? Reina did not doubt Juno's words but was still cautious. Explain yourself. As I have said, I am merely a servant and observer. A helper for Percy of sorts. The man replied casually without skipping a beat. Percy was 100% sure that he did not recognize this man in any way, but he exuded no murderous intent or any intent at all upon closer inspection. Reina continued to scrutinize the man for a couple more minutes before relaxing and sighed. Very well, it seems you have no intention of leaving. Come along as well, I must trust Juno's words for it. Upon arrival, the demigods that followed Rain swiftly disbanded at her command and headed for what seemed to be the barracks, leaving only Percy, Reina and the unknown man. As they walked along a path within the camp, Reina suddenly spoke up. How did you find this place? Ah, a giant wolf named Lupa told me where to go, Percy replied simply. Reina did not flinch at his response, as if what he had just said was natural. Then what about before you met Lupa? Reina continued to question Percy while keeping her eyes focused forward. To be honest, I don't quite remember much before meeting Lupa, Percy replied honestly. All while under the watchful eye of the unknown man whose gaze Reina found to be quite uncomfortable, but she had no choice but to ignore it. A son of Neptune during these times, how rare, Reina mused to herself. You seem to be quite old. How have you survived up until now? At this question, Percy could only stop and stare at Reina with greater confusion than before. What did she mean by able to survive? Oh, was it because monsters like the Gorgons hunt down all of the demigods who aren't able to make it to safety? If so, then how did Percy survive up until where he was now? Perhaps was he somewhere similar to Camp Jupiter? Percy pondered for a while before shaking his head and deciding to not worry too hard over it. He was alive for now, that should be enough. After crossing a bridge at the end of the path, they stopped near a couple of buildings. While all of them were equally impressive, one of them stood out the most, not only due to the size of the building but also how clean it was. The two of you must wait here until I get back. Do not go anywhere else without my permission, as you are only guests. Reina firmly stated as she left Percy alone with the unknown man. It seems that we are finally alone and I can properly introduce myself, the man beside Percy suddenly stated. My name is Diablo and I have been sent by my master to observe you. I assume that he will prefer if you were protected, so I have erected a barrier around us for the meantimes. It will simply deter others away from us. Percy could only stare speechlessly and Diablo spoke. Ah, it seems like someone has entered the barrier through shadow step. Diablo smiled, leaving Percy greatly confused about whatever the hell this shadow step he talked about was. Diablo wordlessly disabled the barrier as Percy suddenly dashed towards the person who had seemingly just popped out of the shadow of another building. Was he somewhat familiar? Hey! Percy suddenly shouted towards the person and Diablo followed behind. Should I know you? Percy asked the boy who was now standing in front of them. No, his reply was swift. I am merely visiting and I have never seen someone who looks like you. As swift as his response was, the boy quickly left and disappeared into a building that was drastically different from the white one before. Reina returned after a couple more minutes of uncomfortable silence between Percy and Diablo. Well, uncomfortable to only Percy it seemed. Come with me, you must meet someone else before we officially let you become a demigod of Camp Jupiter. Reina stated as she simply invited Percy and Diablo over to the largest building in the vicinity with a wave of her hand. The building that seemed to glow under the sun. As they neared the towering doors, Reina introduced them to the building. This is the Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the person we will be meeting should be inside for now. Things have been tense with the upcoming praetor election. Foo-foo, this building certainly is impressive, Diablo suddenly commented from behind Percy, but it is still not a match to awe. Again, please excuse my musings. Reina and Percy could only wonder what meaning his words might have meant as they entered the building. Diablo simply continued to scrutinize his surroundings as this was a one-in-a-century chance to observe a different world. Perhaps this world had something novel that he had yet to learn about. This place seems to be for the worshipping of the gods. Considering the name Jupiter, then it is a temple for this leader of Olympus. Everything in front of Diablo's eyes was to be dissected and studied as his thoughts ran around processing all the new information as the trio walked through the halls. What a shame I cannot provoke any of the gods as Lord Rimuru ordered for us to not to disturb any of the natural processes here. Here we are. Reina suddenly stopped before an impressive statue. Wait here until he comes, I have other matters to attend to for the time being. With that statement, Reina promptly left, leaving Percy and Diablo behind standing in front of the enormous statue with nothing to do but stand around. But of course, standing still with nothing to do is particularly hard, especially when one has ADHD. Percy began to unknowingly wander further and further away from where he was supposed to be waiting as he eventually came upon a separate room away from the statue. The door of the room was by no means small but still considerably shrunken compared to the front door. It was also slightly open with a small crack as a voice from inside could be heard. TCH. It would be great to have a revelation just about now. It's too close, I must gather as many supporters as possible before then. At least I still have the information on Hazel, she has no choice but to. The rant of the person inside the room seemed to go on forever, followed by the sound of fabric ripping and the person muttering about prophecies. Percy stepped closer towards the crack. The sight he was met with was certainly not something that one would normally expect. Piles upon piles of pushies were laid around within the room from what Percy could see. Each one had been slit with the stuffing leaking out with more being tossed into the pile by the muttering person striding across the room. I've wasted enough time already. Didn't Reina say that there was a new half-blood I had to meet? A son of Neptune as well apparently. At these words spoken by the person in the room, Percy immediately backed away from the door and quietly hurried back to his previous spot where Diablo still stood, studying the statue. Hello, you must be the new demigod. The person spoke as Percy just managed to return without looking suspicious. I am Octavian, centurion of the first cohort as well as the augur of Camp Jupiter. Octavian seemed exceedingly smug as he introduced himself, almost as smug as Diablo when he was facing Juno. Unfortunately, the teddy bear in his hands ruined the image rather quickly as Octavian slid out a knife from his belt and began to play with the bear. Unfortunately, Octavian's gaze swiftly narrowed when he turned towards Diablo. We do not accept complete strangers here. Oh no, I am no sort of stranger, Diablo chuckled as if he found the whole situation deeply amusing. I am simply a servant, ordered by my master to watch over the child. Percy could only stand in silence as he watched the banter between Octavian and Diablo. Although only very subtly, Diablo managed to add a mocking tone into his voice. So, it is safe to assume the son of Neptune is with you. Octavian's tone suddenly became much more self-righteous than his monotonous tone before. The numbers are already tight as it is, another demigod's vote might tip the scales out of my favor, or such were the thoughts currently running through Octavian's mind. A son of Neptune as well, he is bound to be powerful. It is best for me to get rid of him as well as this impudent stranger as soon as possible. Well, because we also have a stranger and a son of Neptune, then we will consult the auguries. No. Octavian said after a couple of moments of thought, his expression unchanging from the smug one. Let's see what the others think of this situation. Now follow along. Left with no chance to put in his opinion, Percy could only follow Octavian as Diablo took extra care to stay right behind Percy. As Reina, Percy and Diablo entered the Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Who is the person who just talked to you? Another girl, Hazel Levesque, a daughter of Pluto, asked. That was Percy. I had heard from some other friends that he had disappeared, but it seems like something else is at play here if he can't remember things that are supposed to be common sense for demigods. Nico D'Angelo, Hazel's half-brother, replied. I was about to ask why you acted like you didn't recognize him, Hazel began. Only gods and some of the more powerful beings can manipulate memories, right? Most likely, Nico answered. Seeing as everything is fine for the meantime, I will be leaving now. See you later. Hazel only watched as Nico sank back into the shadows while she herself became immersed in her own thoughts and eventually, memories. She remembers living with just her mother. The two of them were a rather poor family who were just able to scrape by. They thought they had struck gold one day when they had discovered Hazel's ability to create precious minerals and gold. She also remembers the lavish yet brief time of their lives when they lived in happiness as her mother made money off of the gold that Hazel created. But it was not long before everything came crashing down as the buyers of her gold protested that everything was cursed. Finally, Hazel remembers her birthday. The day when she saw her father, Pluto, for the first time she could remember. Even though she had only just met the man, she just knew it was her father. He had just exited the door that led to the room that Hazel's mother was in. "Don't worry, child, in the future a son of Neptune will break your curse." The words said by her father rang in her head as Hazel snapped back to reality from the commotion outside. "Hey, apparently there's a new demigod that has joined us, I wonder which cohort he'll be in." A voice whose source was unknown to Hazel said. "They say that it's the son of Neptune that just came." Another person joined in, "Maybe he'll end up in the first cohort." Hazel did not bother with the laughter of the others anymore as she headed towards the barracks to where she heard this demigod would be. If it was truly the son of Neptune, then perhaps he could save her from her curse.